Hey, it's Brad. So, ever since I was a kid, one of the concepts that always intrigued me was Noblesse Oblige, which is the honor bound duty obligation of the ruling noble class to those that they rule. And you can view it from a farmer and cattle perspective if you want to be cynical about it. But really it comes down to any sort of a one to many relationship of leadership and guidance and shepherding. And having been something, you know a lens that I like to look through for quite a while, it's yields some interesting aspects of things. Like, I just today was listening to an old interview, and they're all old, but of Terrence McKenna, and he pointed out something that I hadn't really considered before because it's just so foreign that I don't really think about the dynamics of it. But cultures that have orgies, and I don't mean just as an event, I mean as like part of the culture, generally, in a religious or sometimes purely hedonistic just festival, carnival. Um, because you can't trace paternal lineage, the loyalty of the men belongs to the group rather than to their individual family unit. And that's really interesting because the implications for transitions upwards from tribal, and then that maps to like the marriages for political and kingdom unifications and things like that. It's an interesting dynamic. It's like so foreign on so many levels, against the way things are now. But in a culture where it would be detrimental for the laity, the serfs and the minions, to, I mean, in this case, have those type of events, whether for moral reasons or population control or whatever. You would want to emphasize the lineage and genetic purity aspects for them, while turning around and maintaining by the book the same sort of purity from keeping all such celebration within the family, which that's how you get all the inbreeding from medieval times and stuff. I mean, there's a whole lot wrong with that approach. And I mean, when you do something that's different from what you teach without any sort of rectifying path, then you're just kind of crafting stumbling blocks and hiding them under your bed and just waiting for somebody to find it. If the path in discovering those is more like a scavenger hunt or a game, then it can instill the requisite understanding so you can have that kind of semantic encoding lock, so that by the time someone is experiencing a certain amount of information or a certain piece of information, they have the context and understanding to really parse it correctly. It'd be like if you had to, you know, go through a tutorial before you got to see a piece of art. It's really foreign, but like, if you want to make sure that no one could, take things out of context, get the wrong message, which depending on the importance and potentially, any dangerous bit of information, you really wouldn't want it to be misinterpreted, misunderstood. So just inherently you could have kind of safeguards built in by, couching it in, self-conflicting terms, up until, everything locks into place. And like to prevent the stumbling block issue, things need to be, handled carefully. Like, I keep telling my son, not to say, gibberish words or things. Not that, trying to squash his creativity or something. Just when he likes the way a word sounds, he repeats it, and it, like, he heard the name of Necco wafers the other day, or a few weeks back, and for a while his favorite word to go around spontaneously yelling was Necco. Okay, no, that, there's so many ways that doesn't go well, so let's just avoid the whole word, even though that by itself is an innocent term. Or like, say you set your kid up for failure, to go to the other side of things. And, a lot of people like take a hard route of parenting where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to put my kid into very Spartan again. I'm going to make my kid experience these trials and tribulations to build character. Well, there's enough of that in the world. You don't need to add more. But, like, say you set them up with a joke, perfectly timed, so it's, something like, all these buckets in a room are exactly the same. If one bucket's green, another bucket's green. You can tell things about all the other buckets by looking at any one of the buckets. So if one bucket has, a handle, another bucket has a handle. If one bucket, has holes, if there's holes in one bucket, and you just kind of pause and wait and ask for the kid to answer. It's like, well, another bucket has a hole. Somebody walks in, another bucket has a hole. What'd you just say? No, okay, totally misheard. Big contrived joke, just to set him up. And, I mean, okay, that particular instance was completely and very intentionally contrived, but because the dynamic maps so flagrantly onto actual instances that I've seen all sorts of places. I don't want to go into specifics or anything, not right now anyway, but just the short-term return of, known quantities. You end up getting sidetracked by excitement and things where it's just an indulgence into known profit and known benefit without evaluating risks, and that's where complacency gets dangerous. And it's only through that, constant sober reevaluation, that you can refine your gold. You need to internalize kind of a rule checking and reality checking step in your entire thought process. And then once you do that, doing things right just becomes second nature.